Apple Blitz with Anthony Rivardo and Matt O'Leary.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Big Apple Blitz. What is going on? Matt O'Leary alongside Anthony Rivardo. Anthony, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great, man. Listen, we are 2 weeks away from training camp. We're getting really close to that time of the year where football gets back into full swing. Training camp is so exciting. You get to see a lot of positional battles. You get to see the rosters really start to take shape and maybe even some trades and signings that you didn't expect. So a really exciting time in the NFL season right around the corner. But in the meantime, taking a look at some of these Jets and Giants storylines and enjoying the Hard Knock episodes every week. So far, it's been a really good show, and I'm excited to kind of discuss that and any other Giants and Jets topics.
Yeah, I was telling you just before we got started on the air here that I've really enjoyed this behind the scenes off-season look. The training camp one's fun, but as a football nerd, especially this past episode, which we'll get into, I think we got just absolutely, insane levels of behind the scenes looks on how these organizations make decisions in free agency and then also conduct themselves at the combine with these interviews.
Yeah, I think that we've gotten some really awesome behind-the-scenes access. I think that the Giants, to their credit, have allowed a lot to be aired in these episodes, a lot more than I think most fans expected. I think that we all kind of had this worry that maybe the Giants would have their fingers too involved in the editing process and wouldn't let HBO really show off the behind-the-scenes footage that they captured. But so far, I mean, they've shown off a lot. They've shown off discussions about Daniel Jones that we probably didn't expect them to show in the episodes. And they also, of course, the big one was the discussions with Saquon Barkley, and the other big one being the discussions with GM Elliott Wolf of the New England Patriots. Those are all things that I knew we'd probably get some inkling of, but to the extent that they've shown that stuff so far has been impressive on the Giants end. Have to give them credit, and also just really exciting and interesting to watch as a fan getting that behind the scenes access.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can we start with the Saquon one? Because I thought that their conversation first, we get the GM Joe Shane calls up Saquon's agent and is like, hey, we're gonna let him hit the market and then come back. I thought the conversation at the end with Saquon got a little uncomfy when he was asking, like, hey, can we come? Like, can I get your word that you're going to come back? And then Saquon kind of just was short with him, was like, I already told you where I want to be. And then it kind of just ended like that. Again, like, that is not something that we really ever get to see. I was kind of just curious your reaction to that scene in particular.
Yeah, so I feel like we only got half the story so far on the Saquon saga. I think we'll get more of it next week. I do think that some of the reactions from Giants fans have been a little bit premature, kind of discussing the offers that were made to Saquon. We haven't seen an offer get made yet. We've seen discussions about a potential offer. Next week's episode is the free agency episode, so we'll see exactly how it all went down at the start of free agency with Saquon Barkley. But I'd say so far, it has been kind of intriguing to see that back and forth between Joe Shane and Saquon's agent. I think that Saquon sounded displeased with the Giants as soon as he picked up that phone call that they showed in the episode. And I also think that Joe Shane has taken a few jabs at Saquon and his agency throughout both of these episodes, has kind of like poked fun at the fact that they passed up on the contract that he offered last year, and has just overall seemed displeased with Saquon's handling of this contract negotiation. So it kind of makes sense when you see this and you know that the end result is him going off to Philadelphia in free agency. It all kind of pieces together as an interesting little puzzle. But yeah, it's been really, really exciting to watch Joe Shane go through this negotiation process and, in my opinion, make the right decision not to overpay a 27-year-old running back.
Yeah, but totally good with the decision that they ended up coming to, right? Like, I just, like, that conversation in particular was not one that I was really expecting to see on camera, because, it was one where, I don't know if heat is not the right word, but they went back and forth a little bit. You could tell that they weren't necessarily, each side probably wasn't very happy with the other one, and kind of just seeing that unfold, one, was unexpected for me, but two, also as just a football fan, like really awesome to see. And that wasn't the only one, like you pointed out too. They go all the way over to the New England Patriots at the combine to talk about the trade. So very obvious that those rumors are true, that they were very interested in moving up for a quarterback in this year's draft.
Yeah, that was the biggest bombshell of the episode for me. Like you mentioned, the back and forth between Joe Shane and Saquon was really interesting. And obviously, it did look to be a little bit heated. Maybe that isn't the word, like you said, but it was definitely getting there. You could tell that there was at least some sort of animosity, some sort of underlying tension between those two. But then you get to the combine scenes. Obviously, the Giants go through those combine interviews with the quarterbacks, which was also a really exciting part of the episode to watch. Drake May absolutely crushed the whiteboard. JJ McCarthy as well, I thought came off as really intelligent, having really high football processing. So that was all exciting, but then it immediately led into Joe Shane negotiating with Elliott Wolf a little bit, asking him what his price tag might be for the number 3 overall pick. So there's a few takeaways from that. First of all, it's confirmed now. Any Giants fan who got angry at me in the comment section on Fireside Giants when I tried to tell you all that the Giants were, in fact, negotiating for the number 3 pick. There were so many people saying that's not true. It's all rumors. It's all BS. You can't trust these reports. Now it's confirmed. The Giants did at least have some sort of interest in trading for the number 3 overall pick. So I don't want to hear it anymore. I don't want to hear anybody say that that wasn't true and that they were standing by Daniel Jones the entire time. It's so obvious when you watch these episodes that Joe Shane has so many concerns about Daniel Jones's future and was absolutely intent on, I think, Drake May being that guy, but finding that next guy in this draft. So again, credit to HBO, credit to the Giants for allowing that footage to be accessed worldwide and letting us see Joe Shane create that first negotiation with the Patriots. But man, it also does have me sitting here wondering what if, just wishing that maybe a trade did go through and Drake May did wind up with the New York Giants. That would have been the alternate reality that I would have been really happy in.
Yeah, and I was going to follow that up because they did show some scenes of the Giants asking these young quarterbacks some questions and having them draw on the board. Now, granted, we don't get to see the full thing, obviously, but was there anyone from that jumped out in either a positive or negative way? Like, man, I think they really liked, let's just use Drake May, for example, or, oh, I don't know how Jaden Daniels did in this situation. Like, was there, did you take away anything from those, or not really enough to really get into, I guess?
I think that Brian Dable looked enamored by Drake May and his processing on the whiteboard. I think we all kind of felt that way watching him. He was really impressive in the footage that they showed during that interview. And like I said, I thought JJ McCarthy came across very impressive, and also Caleb Williams. Really, the only one that didn't impress me a whole lot was Jaden Daniels, believe it or not. I thought that Jaden Daniels, obviously he forgot that one play that Dable had him recite a couple times, which is not a huge deal. And Dable didn't seem to make it a big deal. But I kind of thought that the answer, what do you want us to do if we see cover 1? And he said, just throw a touchdown. I don't know. That wasn't really like the most exciting answer to me. Like that just felt like, I don't know how to beat this coverage, so I'm just going to say throw a touchdown. Dable seemed impressed by it. But Dable also probably didn't want to be rude to the young kid. So I don't know. In general, I thought if I had to rank them, honestly, Caleb Williams was the most impressive. The fact that he called that play, and it happened to be a play that Brett Favre used to call all the time, was really cool. So I do think the Chicago Bears got a great player there. And then Drake May was just so quick, so fast, and breaking down everything with Dable, and seemed really engaged in that conversation. But also to the credit of JJ McCarthy, who the Giants might face in week 1, he showed to have some really great mental processing as well, handling a pro-style offense and some play calls there. So it'll be really interesting to see if Dable can use some of that insight that he gained on JJ McCarthy if they do face off against him in week 1.
Now, while watching this, I've really enjoyed the interactions that they've had with Brandon Brown. I didn't really know a whole lot about him before this Hard Knocks, but I think he's been really good on camera and just in this show. But for me, it feels like he is trying to, at least in the episodes we've seen so far, it seems like he's trying to steer Joe Shane towards the quarterback route, and like he's almost like biting his tongue about Daniel Jones at times. Do you feel the same way there?
I do. I think that Brandon Brown in particular seemed over Daniel Jones. He seemed like he was ready to move on and get the Giants to take a closer look at these quarterback prospects. And kind of to the same point, but on the other end, it felt to me like Brian Dable, yes, was pushing for these quarterbacks because he was really involved in those interviews and seemed really interested in drafting one of them. But he also seemed to be the one that pushed Joe Shane into drafting Malik Neighbors, because the way that the episode played to me was that Joe Shane went to the combine really enamored with Rome Odunze. He was telling his scout next to him, anytime Rome Odunze is doing a drill, make sure that I'm paying full attention. And he was talking about Rome Odunze very highly throughout the episode. But then the topic of Malik Neighbors got brought up by Brian Dable. He said he's an effing dog, and I love the way he plays, and I watch his film all day. And lo and behold, Malik Neighbors ended up being the pick at number 6. So, yeah, I think that there were some in the front office who were pushing Joe Shane towards the quarterbacks. But I do think at the end of the day, when they've realized that they can't get their quarterback, Brian Dable seems to me in this episode, at least, like he was the guy that picked, of the wide receivers still available, Malik Neighbors as his favorite.
Yeah, what'd you think of Malik Neighbors, like some of his answers, for instance, like how he takes losing, or how he takes not getting the ball early on? Is any of that like a red flag for you, or do you kind of agree with what they were saying? Because to me, it felt like they recognized that, and they're like, we're okay with him because he's like he's an alpha. He wants the ball, and this is a plus. This is a green flag actually for us.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I feel about it, because I think the Giants have too many nice guys in their locker room right now. Nobody who really is an alpha, no dogs in the locker room, nobody who's willing to beat down a cornerback, get in his face about it, and then go make another play on top of that. Like, we haven't seen that from the Giants since OBJ. Obviously, you're going to hear so many comparisons between Malik Neighbors and Odell because they both got drafted highly by the Giants. They both played at LSU, and honestly, their demeanor is pretty similar, with the kind of aggression and maybe you could call it diva mentality that they play with. I don't know if we can go that far with Malik Neighbors just yet, but I liked the quote from Brandon Brown, the assistant GM, where he pretty much said, show me a killer at that position, paraphrasing here, but he said, show me a killer at that position that was a choir boy. There wasn't any. So you got to go after a guy who's got that mean streak and kind of has that, that flair to him. And he mentioned that the Giants don't have that. He said he gives us something that we simply don't have on this roster. And again, I agree with that. The Giants need more alpha dogs. They don't have enough. It's pretty much now Malik Neighbors on offense and nobody else. And I'm really excited about that. I also looked at that as a green flag. And I love the fact that Brian Dable was excited by Malik Neighbors' responses. And so was I. I think his quote about hating losing more than he loves winning was really awesome. We've heard Odell Beckham Jr. actually say that exact quote in the past. So I'm even more excited. OBJ is one of my favorite players of all time. I loved his personality and the way that he played the game. So if Malik Neighbors is bringing some of that over here, then, you could sign me up every day of the week for that.
Yeah, that was one of my big takeaways from it as well, is I think they liked his intensity, and they have something he has something that they didn't previously have on the roster. And we've seen in the first couple episodes, they've mentioned like needing a true number one receiver. So I really loved, honestly, the first 2 episodes of this. I think the second one was better, and it kept me engaged much more than the first one, but really excited to get some behind the scenes on how the draft played out, which I think is coming very soon here.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be free agency in the next episode, and then after that, it should be the draft episode. I don't remember how many episodes there are. I think it's 6, so I don't know how much they're going to drag out certain aspects of it. Obviously, the draft is such a big event that could probably be more than one episode, and you could probably argue the same for free agency, but I am really excited for the draft episode in particular. Free agency, all right, we know how that played out. Giants went after a few offensive linemen, and then they made a big splash with Brian Burns. All right, but I want to see behind the scenes of the draft. What conversation took place with the Patriots? What went into picking Malik Neighbors over Rome Odunze? Again, it looks like that was a Dable pick, but I just can't wait to get more behind the scenes access for the draft and seeing more of that process that the Giants went through to ultimately pick the players that they picked, not taking an outside cornerback, not taking an extra pass rusher, not drafting a single offensive or defensive lineman, despite those being positions of need. Why did these things happen? How did they settle on the players that they selected? I'm really excited for the future episodes of Hard Knocks.
Absolutely. So, but before we transition and get into our first Jets topic of the day, there's some breaking NFL news that relatively related to the New York Jets that I want to pull up and get your reaction to. The newest Tennessee Titan blitz boy, Jamal Adams, goes to Tennessee. Jets play the Titans in week 2. So I'm hoping for some revenge. That would be nice.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun. That'd be really exciting. I'm surprised in some ways that it took this long for Jamal Adams to find a home. He's not necessarily the player that he once was, and I don't know if he ever was the player that some believed he once was personally, but I thought that his former Pro Bowl pedigree would have gotten him a home beforehand. But I think the revenge game to look forward to in week 2 should be exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see how that one goes. He hasn't played a ton over the last couple of years. So we'll see what he's like at this point. But I wanted to get into first Jets topic of the day, which is Aaron Rodgers doing some recruiting. So Devontae Adams was recently on with Kay Adams, and he was saying that Aaron Rodgers has been in his ear, which insinuating that he's trying to get them to link back up. This is something that I think we've discussed in the past about the Jets being active at the NFL trade deadline. And if the Raiders start slow, I don't see why they necessarily keep him around. And the Jets, with how they maneuvered in the 2024 draft class, now have 2 third-round picks in the 2025 draft and some ammunition to go make a move and position themselves to be aggressive at the deadline here. So, putting you on the spot, Devontae Adams a Jet in a few months here. What do we think?
I'm going to say no, just because I think that it's very hard to predict something like that. That's such a big time move and a real blockbuster. To try and predict that happens during the regular season, I feel like those blockbusters usually happen at the start of free agency. Pretty rare to see it during the regular season, but I do think that there is an outside chance that it happens. The recruiting, Rodgers usually gets his way here in New York, has been the trend so far through the first year and a half. So maybe it happens, but at the end of the day, I think that Antonio Pierce, the Las Vegas Raiders' new head coach, is going to do everything under his power to keep Devontae Adams on the roster.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And yeah, as Peter, who's hanging out with us, says, so long as there's no tampering involved, go for it. Yeah, but borderline tampering, there's so many things that are borderline tampering in the NFL. I do think the Jets will be aggressive, but I don't know if Adams ends up being that guy. I don't know what the Raiders are at this point. Like, they don't have that young guy of the future on the roster. At least I don't think. Like, I'm not an O'Connell guy, and Gardner Minshew feels like a stopgap. So, like, what are they going to tear it down? Do they want to kind of just stay in this middle ground for now and maybe look at a quarterback next year? I'm kind of just confused, like, what their plan is, and if, keeping a 31-year-old Devontae Adams, like, how that helps them.
I mean, they definitely look like a team that could blow it up and trade off all their assets, but at the same time, they look like a team that got new life breathed into them halfway through last season with Antonio Pierce. And again, I don't think Antonio Pierce is willing to tear it down and rebuild. I think he wants to ride the high that he felt last year. I mean, there was so much positive energy surrounding the Raiders for about 6 weeks, I would say, like half of the season, almost 8 weeks. And so I think he wants to keep that going, keep that positive energy flowing, and find a way to just be the player's coach who wills his team to victory in some ways, kind of similar to Dan Campbell. Now, I know obviously people have criticisms of Dan Campbell and how his player's coach mentality maybe gets in the way sometimes. That could happen with Antonio Pierce here. He could end up being too aggressive, not making those smart roster building decisions. And ultimately, I could come back to bite him with not trading away Devontae Adams or any other players. But I just have the vibe and sense that the Raiders are going to go for it this year, despite clearly and obviously not having the roster to do so. And we'll see ultimately how that pays off. But if it doesn't pay off well and halfway through the season, they're like, okay, Pierce, you're on the hot seat after 8 weeks being hired. Screw it. We're going to have to start selling off some assets, and you're going to have to show us that you can be a player's coach without your stars.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, they did finish, to their credit, I believe it was 5-4. Antonio Pierce finished in the second half of the year. So who knows? Maybe they feel like they could compete in a division that's not great outside of Kansas City. The division that feels like it's up for grabs. 7 wild card teams now. So maybe they do want to stay in the mix. Brian asked an interesting question, I think. He says, is Mike Williams going to be cleared early in camp, or really not practice with the team and be on the PUP list? I think he's going to be on a similar trajectory to what Breece Hall was a year ago. So Brees Hall tore his ACL in week 6 or 7 in 2022. It was the Denver game. I'm trying to remember which week that was. But anyway, Mike Williams did it in week 3 last year. So I think we see him brought on slowly, but in August, that's when they kind of ramp him back up. So maybe not for the first couple of weeks, but at some point in August, they'll get him going and practicing. I don't know how much we see him in like preseason games, though.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure either. Preseason is always kind of an interesting period because it's really up to each coach. Like, how much do they want to risk each of their starters? I don't think we'll probably see Mike Williams then. Yeah, it'd be great to get him some game time experience or practice rather before the regular season. But at the same token, he's got a long injury history. Why risk it during the preseason will probably be the mindset and keep him off. But hopefully he's able to hit the practice field as soon as possible and develop that chemistry with Aaron Rodgers. But if he's not able to hit the practice field ASAP, that does open up the door for some extra practice time and chemistry to be built with guys like Malachi Corley and Xavier Gibson. So we'll see how that goes for Rodgers and the Jets wide receivers.
What about getting back on the Jets trade conversation? Peter brings up maybe the Jets go after T. Higgins or Cortland Sutton at the trade deadline. Sutton's a name that I feel like we've talked about for a really, really long time for the New York Jets. T. Higgins, I don't see the Bengals trading him because even if they're in it and they know that they're going to lose him at the end of the year, like they're kind of pushing their chips to the table trying to win a Super Bowl. But we know Denver's not really in that spot. So what do you think of potentially like someone like Cortland Sutton at the deadline?
I could totally see Cortland Sutton getting moved at the deadline. I think the Broncos are going to be terrible this year. I don't think that Sean Payton is this great head coach that everybody thinks he is. And I think they're going to suck this season and they're going to have to trade away some of their assets. I don't think Bo Nix is their savior. So I could see Sutton being moved, especially after they moved on from Jerry Jeudy. I think that they kind of recognize their roster is not in the most competitive state. And it probably is time to sell off some of their higher valued assets. So Sutton at the deadline makes a lot of sense. But like you said with T. Higgins, I think the Bengals are going to be trying to compete this year. Sure, maybe if they're 2-6 in week 8, then they make a trade and T. Higgins could get moved. But I don't think that's the case. I think they're going to try their best to keep T. Higgins in Cincinnati for the long haul. And even if they know that they're going to lose him, like you said, I think they're going to try and go for the chip this year and maximize the kind of Super Bowl window that they're under. So I don't see T. Higgins being a realistic option.
No, me neither. Although the Darius Slayton one is one that I like that you brought up. I would totally be in on that. Maybe you're flipping one of the thirds or a 4th round pick or something for him.
And the point that I'll make on that one that I think is kind of important to realize, bringing in a T. Higgins gives the Jets another number 1 option. Like, that guy is a number 1. He plays number 2 alongside Jamar Chase, of course, but he's looking for a number 1 opportunity. He wants to be the focal point in an offense. The Jets already have their focal point in Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Sometimes it creates an imbalance and not the best dynamic when you bring in a second and number 1 receiver. You know, that's probably not what T. Higgins is looking for, to play alongside a guy like Garrett Wilson. And at the end of the day, you have Garrett Wilson and T. Higgins, and you still have Malachi Corley, who you want to develop, and Mike Williams as well. I don't think it makes a ton of sense to bring in another number 1. So bringing in a guy who's settled into a career number 2 role like Darius Slayton, who doesn't need 120 targets in a season, I think that makes more sense than a T. Higgins trade. It's better value for the Jets. They're giving up a lower pick, and they're still increasing the ceiling of their offense with a guy who fits in very nicely in that 2nd, 3rd receiver role.
Yeah, I mean Adams or Higgins or Ayuk is a name that gets thrown around a lot. Like, that's a lot more flashy and would be a lot of fun. But I think you can do what you're trying to do, right, and improve this wide receiver room, like the depth of it, and elongate it, because we know that like Garrett Wilson's a number 1. You don't necessarily need a number 1. But if you add a Slayton or a Cortland Sutton or someone of that round, I think things could work out well there. So we'll see what they do, but they have a ton of different options for in-season trades, and I think they are active in season. I saw an article, Anthony, that really shocked me because a friend of the show, our guy, Daniel Jones, big Daniel Jones supporters, apparently is a top 10 clutch quarterback in the league.
Yeah, apparently. I mean, listen, I get the argument that was kind of made in this article about how Daniel Jones in 2022 was absolutely clutch. I don't think there's any denying that. I think we've all kind of been in agreement that throughout all of his struggles in his 5-year career so far, Daniel Jones had a very nice 2022 season. Now, granted, it was a very nice season where he only threw 15 touchdown passes, but he won football games. He played very clean football. He didn't turn the ball over. He used his legs. Like, he willed the Giants to a few clutch victories and eventually into a clutch come from behind postseason win. So, yeah, he was really clutch that season, but to call him one of the most clutch quarterbacks when he's really only had one season of clutch play, how do you know it wasn't just a flash in the pan? I don't think that I'm up there with a top 8 most clutch quarterback in the NFL, Daniel Jones. Don't think you can get me on the same page as CBS Sports with that one, but I do think that you can argue that 2022 season was very clutch.
Peter chimes in, patented year 6 leap incoming. It's coming, man. It's like a freight train. It's going to come. No, I'm with you, right? Like, if this was maybe coming off his 2022 season, I could get behind that a little bit more. But right now, like, you only saw him for 6 games last year, and he wasn't very good in those 6 games also. And I know, like, we've all heard like the extenuating circumstances with the offensive line and, the whole thing. We know the story through 5 years with Daniel Jones, but I just, for me, it's very hard to buy into that happening and buy into him being one of the top clutch quarterbacks in football. Because as you said, it's really only that 1 year. Unfortunately, I thought he had a good rookie season. We're going back a while now in 2019, but he had a losing record. He was 3-9 in those 12 games. But moral of the story for me, the only one that makes sense is his 9-6-1 season. Had a big win in the playoffs that year. If this article was written a year ago, fine, but it just seems so odd, the timing of it, after we barely saw him last year and he wasn't really all that good last year.
Yeah, listen, I can think of a few moments outside of that 2022 season where he was clutch. Like, as a rookie, he beat Washington in overtime. He had 5 touchdown passes in that game. That was a clutch performance, but again, that was in 2019. 2020, he had 0 game-winning drives. He had 1 in 2021. Yeah, he had the 5 in 2022. Like we said, he was clutch that season, but last season, he didn't play well. He did have that one game versus Arizona where he just transformed into a monster and willed the team from behind in the second half of the game. But then the following game, he looked like crap again, and he did for most of the season. So I don't know. It's just hard for me to get behind calling him a truly clutch quarterback or putting him ahead of guys like Lamar Jackson. He was ahead of on this list. I think that there's more to being clutch than just getting game-winning drive statistics. I think that a lot of those blowout games that the Giants have lost in recent years, had he made a clutch throw on 3rd down, it doesn't become a blowout game. It's not just about putting up game-winning drives. It's also about making clutch plays throughout the game. A 3rd and long, how often is he converting those? Those are clutch plays. Even if they're happening in the first quarter, converting a 3rd and long is a clutch play. And he doesn't do a whole lot of that throughout the games. So unfortunately, the Giants lose a lot of games. So I don't get behind calling him one of the most clutch quarterbacks in the NFL. He has his moments, absolutely, and I'll never take that away from Daniel Jones. And despite everything, I will still be rooting for him this season because he wears a Giants helmet and starts at quarterback. But overall, I do think it's really hard to get behind that narrative. However, there is one thing that could make him the most clutch quarterback in the NFL. He is absolutely entering the most make or break season coming off of a torn ACL. If he ends up having a monster year, winning comeback player of the year in the patented year 6 leap, then he probably is one of the most clutch quarterbacks in the NFL if he rises to the occasion and has the year 6 leap.
Yeah, this is I pulled it up. This is such a bizarre list. And here, maybe I'll share the tabs that we can go through it together here. Herbert at 10, Lamar at 9, like you mentioned, Daniel Jones at 8, Joe Burrow 7, Dak at 6, Goff up there at 5 is a little surprising for me also. Allen, Hurts, number 2, CJ Stroud, and then number 1, Patrick Mahomes. Not really surprised with some of the top guys on the list, but I feel like there's some guys potentially even missing off of here that probably should have cracked it over, Daniel Jones or maybe even Jared Goff.
I think there's another number 8 that should be somewhere on that list that you're probably pretty familiar with. I don't care if
Oh,
he didn't
you
play
include
last season.
Aaron Rodgers. Okay, yeah, that one he's got to be on there somewhere. I wasn't thinking him. I was gonna even go. Not that I'm crazy like saying he's a top 3 quarterback like some are, but like Brock Purdy wins a lot of games too. I don't know about.
Mhm.
I think I would rather Brock Purdy over someone like Goff or Daniel Jones here.
Hell, I think even Baker Mayfield is more clutch than some of the guys on that list. He rises to the
The
clutch.
Big Show.
Yeah, man. I mean, but no, Rodgers is one of the most clutch quarterbacks you could argue in NFL history with some of the plays that he's made and postseason moments. I mean, yeah, sure. If we're talking most recent sample size in the last couple of years, yeah, some of these guys have probably been more clutch than Rodgers and some of the other quarterbacks who should be on this list. But then how the hell does Daniel Jones show up at number 8 when he's just had the one season plus last year he barely played? And when he did, it was mostly bad, other than one half against a shitty Arizona team. Pardon my French. So I don't know. The list just doesn't make sense to me. Like overall, top to bottom, I think it's wacky. Like Dak Prescott, I think that people know I'm a big Dak Prescott fan,
Me
despite
too.
being a Giants fan. I think he's a great quarterback, but having him in the top 5 most clutch, probably not going to win that argument. I don't think, and that's me coming from me as a big Dak guy. So yeah, overall, I just think that list is really wacky. I can't get behind a lot of the rankings on there. Even Justin Herbert being on the list, I don't know about that. But yeah, I think that list has a lot of room for improvement.
No Stafford either. I feel like Stafford's got to be up there. He's been
Crazy,
doing it a long time.
absolutely.
Yeah, so I don't really get that one, but an interesting thing to bring up, at least I think there. So maybe we do get the year 6 leap, and then we talk about how he's the number 1 clutch guy in the NFL, or number 2 actually, right behind Patrick Mahomes. Let's not get crazy here.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. I mean, hey, if he beats Mahomes in the Super Bowl on a come from behind victory, he takes it amidst the year 6 lead, then yes, he's the number 1 most clutch quarterback in the NFL. But I don't know if any of us are betting the farm on that happening.
No, let's get into. We were just talking to some Aaron Rodgers here. Let's get into it. So, Mike Williams, one of the newest New York Jets, was talking about the Jets play calling situation, or in a way, he talked about it because he was asked about what it's been like being with Aaron Rodgers, and what he essentially said was, it doesn't matter what the play call is because once you get to line of scrimmage, Aaron Rodgers is going to put you in a position to succeed and change the play at the line and get the guys in the right spot, which, again, not necessarily breaking news. We all knew this, but it's kind of nice to hear that being said, because I know like Nathaniel Hackett's play calling is obviously a red flag and something that maybe holds this team back a little bit. I mean, it did last year, but Rodgers getting back into the mix and really being the one deciding the plays at the line, I think is going to be huge for the Jets in 2024.
I think it's going to be the exact piece that they were missing in this past season. I think that so much of a successful NFL offense comes down to the quarterback's mental processing, his ability to change the play at the line of scrimmage, and the autonomy that he's given to do so. You can't tell me Zach Wilson had the autonomy to just call plays and hot routes and move things around at the line of scrimmage last year. No, it was just Nathaniel Hackett's offense. But now that it's going to be collaboratively Hackett's offense plus Aaron Rodgers' offense, you're going to see significant improvements over what we saw last season. And I think, again, when you look at the most clutch quarterbacks in the NFL all across the league, or if you just look at the best, they call plays, they change plays, they move things around, they run the show on offense. The best quarterbacks do. And it was the missing element in the Jets offense last year, in my opinion. And I think that having Rodgers and all of his veteran experience, MVP level experience, time and time again, it's going to pay off this year, and it's going to make the biggest difference over any acquisition on the offensive line and the receiving core, anything. The biggest difference is really just having Aaron Rodgers' quarterback mind in that backfield. That's going to be the biggest difference for the Jets this year.
Yeah, and like for Breece Hall, he's not going to be facing, 8, 9 guys in the box like he did all last year, because with, Zach Wilson, Trevor Siemian, or Tim Boyle, like none of those 3 guys are beating you deep down the field. So they could stack the box and be like, all right, we're going to dare you to throw. If that happens this year, if teams sell out and like, we're going to stack the box to stop Breece Hall, well, then Aaron Rodgers is going to put them in a spot where they can push the ball down the field. And then when they back off, guess what? That's when you utilize, Breece or Braylon Allen, or your short passing attack with your, the tight end, or Malachi Corley or Gibson in the slot. So I'm really excited for this year for the offense. I just for them not to be bottom 3 to 5 in the league or worse than that. Like I'm not even saying like, oh, this Jets team, just because they get Rodgers back, they can have the number 1 offense in football. That's not what I'm saying. But even if they're competent, a top half of the league offense, that's going to be so much fun to watch with the talent that they have, and especially on the defense too, man.
Yeah, I mean, with that defense, we've sang its praises endlessly, and I've sang my praises on the entire roster endlessly, and how I think that it's arguably the best in football, top to bottom, even including the offense and the defensive side of the ball. So once you get things rolling on the offensive side and you have Rodgers back in there, it's really just about everybody staying healthy and doing their jobs. Rodgers included in that conversation, obviously after last season's injury, but Mike Williams as well. You need Breece Hall to be healthy. You need the offensive line to be healthy. Tyron Smith is a great player, but how much will he play this year? We probably assume that he's going to miss time with an injury at some point, but keeping this team healthy is the key to success here. And how far will they go really does ultimately boil down to how well the coaching staff does, as we've mentioned before. But you can't underestimate the value of having a veteran quarterback moving plays around at the line of scrimmage. To tie it back into this main topic here, that's going to make such a significant difference because, you become one-dimensional as a team when your quarterback cannot change plays at the line of scrimmage. You're forced into a box. And when Zach Wilson was forced into that box last year and some of the other quarterbacks that were playing for the Jets last year, there wasn't a lot of movement at the line of scrimmage. There wasn't a lot of opportunities to take advantage of obvious coverage weaknesses that defenses were putting out there. But Rodgers can read all those plays at the line of scrimmage, can tell what coverage it is, and then dissect it. And now you're going to be talking about a lot more touchdowns and a lot more yardage gained on offense, and definitely not a bottom 3 offense in the NFL. So really, to me, it just boils down to staying healthy and letting Aaron Rodgers just have his last dance here, so to speak, similar to Michael Jordan back in the late 90s.
I love it. Johnny Boy chimes in. What's going on, man? He says, what's good, guys? Showing some love. Johnny Boy just became a father of 3. So congrats to our guy, Johnny Boy, on having another kid.
Congrats to you, Johnny Boy. That's awesome.
Love that. Peter brings up, I like this one. Need more play action and pre-snap movement. So the Jets never had, they were one of the teams that had the fewest pre-snap motion in the NFL. I think when you look at most of these successful teams in the league, they're moving guys around. I think of, McVay. I think of Shanahan. I think of even the Dolphins. They might do it the most in the league with the pre-snap motion. I think, it's not, you have to do it, but I think especially like last year when the Jets did not have Aaron Rodgers. I know Rodgers mentions he doesn't love to do it as much, but the Jets never pivoted. And when you have a young quarterback in Zach Wilson who needs a lot of help, or if you're starting, a borderline rosterable player in Tim Boyle or Trevor Siemian, like mixing in some pre-snap motion, I think would have been a lot of help for those guys.
Yeah, I think that pre-snap motion is an absolute difference maker in the modern NFL. So is the play action passing game. And there's always this common narrative that goes around with play action where people will argue if you don't have a great running game, you can't do or play action. It's not as effective. And there's actually a lot of studies from outlets like Pro Football Focus and other data and analytics collectors that indicate you don't even need to have a good running game at all for play action to work, because the linebackers have to cover their run fits regardless. So it moves them out of position for at least a half a second, and you open up passing windows. So teams should be utilizing play action and pre-snap motion probably as often as they can. I know some teams run it 70% of the time. Those teams usually find a lot of success. So I think that this Jets offense of Nathaniel Hackett can modernize it a little bit. And maybe Aaron Rodgers has a lot to do with that. Maybe he can recognize these trends around the league as well and share his input and make it happen a little bit more. But yeah, all stuff like that. Peter's right to kind of point that out and discuss how pre-snap motion and play action play a huge role in all of the top offenses in the NFL.
Oh, that first Aaron Rodgers no-look play action is gonna hit so good. I cannot wait to see that. He was doing it in practice and training camp last year. Even had Zach Wilson against the Chiefs pull off that really good play action down by the goal line, and then he hit CJ Uzomah. I want to see that like 100 times this year, at least.
Yeah, and on the reverse, I'm looking forward to more Statue of Liberty play action from Daniel Jones this year, like he did against the Vikings in the wild card round. If you remember that one where he put the ball behind his back on the handoff, give me some more of that. Let's see some more of that sauce get dripped around here for the Jets and the Giants and see these quarterbacks play with a little bit more confidence this year.
Johnny Boy's got a question for you, Anthony. With the news of the GM putting out the call between him and Barkley out on Hard Knocks, what do you think of all that? Does it look bad for the organization? Are you okay with how they came across with this?
I'm okay with how it came across. Again, it's business at the end of the day. Football and the NFL, it's a large business. And you can see footage in the Hard Knocks episode where obviously John Mara doesn't want to see Saquon Barkley go, and maybe he is upset with the situation. But I think that to Joe Shane's credit, he tried his best and he made the decision that he thought was best for the team without succumbing to the pressure of the owner. And that you have to give credit to. And I do think that it makes it look like we are an organization dedicated to football, and we are an organization that lets our football guys make the football decisions. So at the end of the day, I came away excited by this Hard Knocks episode and by the decision to let Saquon Barkley walk in free agency with the way that those negotiations looked like they were going. It just seems to me Joe Shane put a number out there. He set a hard line in the sand, and he said, I will not cross this line. And once the number crossed that line, he walked away. And that's exactly how every GM should operate, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't necessarily blame him for taking the stance. My only, and maybe it was just dramatized a little bit with how they had it on Hard Knocks, like the conversation with, in particular, more with how it ended with Saquon and Joe Shane seemed like a little uncomfortable. But again, like we don't even know the full story yet. They haven't really gotten into the full of free agency. So maybe we have some even more insight in episode 3, how things went. Like maybe we do see Saquon Barkley calling him back and then just saying like, hey, we're not going to match the, what was it, 12 and a half roughly, I think, APV on that.
Right. And I think that's probably what's going to happen. Saquon has said many times on social media and in the media in general that the Giants didn't make him an offer. I'm going to assume that he gets an offer. He probably gives them an opportunity to match it. They choose not to. Therefore, they did not make an offer. It's probably how it's going to go. And again, Shane put a line in the sand and he said he's not going to cross this number. That's the way he has to operate. I just wish he had the same mentality with Daniel Jones because reportedly his number that he wouldn't cross was 35. And then Jones was asking 45 and they settled at 40. 35 feels a lot more digestible than 40 for some reason. It just feels like a lot. It's only $5 million difference, but it feels like a big one when you're talking salary cap. So, and just where he lands in the rankings of the quarterback. So wish that line was set there, but the Saquon thing is interesting, but it's kind of become exhaustive for me at this point with Giants fans and how combative they are to the Saquon topic. I'm actually far more interested in next week's episode to see what went down with Xavier McKinney, because obviously if you guys have been watching the channel, I was really peeved with that one and really upset by the Giants' decision to let him walk. I got to see what happened there. Maybe he had a line in the sand there as well and it got crossed. Packers gave him a boatload of money. That's the one that I'm really curious to see how that negotiation played out.
Yeah, now correct me if I'm wrong, but through the first 2 episodes, I feel like we haven't really heard a whole lot on Xavier McKinney. Like they briefly mentioned him. I think it might have been the most recent one. They were going to have a meeting with his agent, and then I don't think they ever ended up showing that. But
yeah, so it's been mentioned briefly, like you've said, and they haven't really dived into it too deep. Now that could be for a couple reasons. It could be that maybe they're planning on really diving into it in the next episode and didn't want to spoil anything. Maybe it's riveting stuff that they wanted to keep in one episode, make it the talk of the entire episode next week. That's possible. Or maybe the Giants just didn't really prioritize Xavier McKinney. That's also possible. But I do remember in this most recent episode when the new salary cap number came out, Joe Shane was like, wow, we have more money. Maybe we can allocate some of this to Xavier McKinney. So it almost feels like they wanted to bring back McKinney, but didn't think they could afford to bring back Xavier McKinney. And at the end of the day, once he got all that money, they realized that they really couldn't afford him. So, but I don't know. I guess we'll see how it plays out. Hopefully in the next episode. Again, that's something I'm really excited for because I'm either going to feel like I got closure on the situation or I'm going to feel even more pissed off than I was before. So we'll see.
It could reignite the flame. A week from today, we might be having Anthony yelling and screaming about how the Giants effed up the Xavier McKinney situation.
Yeah, there's a really good possibility of that. But again, maybe I'll get some closure and maybe I'll feel better about it. But probably not. I'm probably going to be pissed off next week.
Oh, okay. So Johnny has a take. We'll close the show with this. He goes, can we be honest? The Jets Hard Knocks has been better over the Giants Hard Knocks. Thoughts, guys? What do you think?
I cannot lie to you. I did not watch the Jets Hard Knocks. It came out while I was in college and preoccupied with school and other things. So I didn't get around to that one. But so far, I'm enjoying the Giants one.
Okay, totally fair. We won't kill you on that one. I have enjoyed the Giants one. I think with like they're both very different because the Giants one's more behind the scenes on how the off seasons work, and I think that's been really interesting, and I've liked that. From the Jets side, it was kind of really all about the excitement coming back to the team after being so bad for so long, and with like Rodgers coming in, and some of their rookies last year. So like they're different. I don't know if one was crazy better than the other. I think I actually liked the first Jets Hard Knocks in 2010 better than this past one that they did a year ago.
I also think it's a little bit tough to rewatch that Jets one just because the season didn't go as planned. A lot of it did focus on Aaron Rodgers, and that was something that I was planning on going back and rewatching some of that during the start of the regular season. But then once Rodgers went down, I didn't really feel motivated to go back and watch it. So that's kind of another reason why I didn't get around to viewing the whole thing. I think I saw the first episode or two, but didn't really watch it all. So I can't really comment on it too much and give my full opinion. But the season of the Jets story definitely plays a part in the Jets Hard Knocks, and that will be the same for this Giant season. If this Giant season is a train wreck, this entire Hard Knocks episode or season is gonna play completely differently when you rewatch it next year.
Yep. I am with you on that one. So I think that's going to do it for us in this episode. Any final thoughts on what to expect either side here for the next few days before we talk on Monday?
I'm looking forward to more Hard Knocks episodes for sure, but we're less than 2 weeks away from training camp. We'll see if either team makes some acquisitions ahead of camp. There are still some free agents out there. Maybe that happens, but if not, I'm just looking forward to some camp battles. And once camp starts, like I keep saying, it just ramps up. It like doesn't stop from there. It goes July all the way to February is pretty much football season. So I'm really excited. We're in the home stretch now.
12 days away from both the Jets and the Giants reporting. Very excited for that. I think it's going to be quiet until we talk on Monday, but don't worry. Got another show coming for you then. Guys, it's going to do it for us on this one. Make sure to subscribe before you go. Subscribe to Anthony's work on Fireside Giants. Me, you can find me at Matt O'Leary NY and Talking Jets. That'll do it. I'm Matt. He's Anthony, and we will talk to you next time.